call signs fancy.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Without Equal podcast. So today, we're going to talk about commitment and the varying types of commitment that exist both as a leader, as a member of a team, as a member of an organization. I think we're going to kind of touch on some things that we've seen both positive and negative in our experience. So once again, I'm Rob McQueen. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Steve Cargill and Chris Perry. And together we are the founding team of Sine Pare. So welcome to our podcast. Here we go. So kind of commitment is an interesting thing, Steven. I want to kick today's episode off with your kind of vignette. And you did a good job of writing it up in the comments that we put out there about your experience in Afghanistan working with NATO SOF. But I really would like you to dig into that experience, that vignette, and start the conversation off there. So break that down and like give us the full, sitting around the campfire. This is the shit that happened. Here's how I dealt with it. Here was my challenge. And if you can, paint a little bit of the interpersonal piece, because I think that is really where you made some money in this scenario.
Yeah. So when I went to Afghanistan 2012, 2013, I went with some NATO partners, and we actually had the opportunity to go meet them, train with them, and really get to know them ahead of time during a month-long training event the summer prior. So we had some good connectivity there. We developed a good baseline understanding of one another, each other's capabilities. We got to meet each other's families, etc. So that was really good in order to develop that real human-to-human understanding of each other, which was really foundational in terms of how we were able to proceed and get over some of the humps that we experienced when we finally got in country. And so later on, we were all programmed together to deploy. And what our mission was to go together, to be partnered, and together mentor and guide and lead operations with a special police unit for the province in Kunar province in Afghanistan. And so what we wound up doing was a couple of different things in order to feel out how our partners best wanted to participate, because there was a history between our element and these NATO partners where we've done multiple rotations. Everybody knows what the expectations are for going down range, for preparing, for the demobilization, and our partners knew the ins and outs of the numbers as well, in terms of how much they earned, how much we earned, and which was a huge sticking point for them, because as I described in the blog, they were getting 25%. They were earning 25% of what we were earning in order to do the same operations, experience the same bombs, the same shooting, and the same danger. And so that was something that really weighed heavily on them. And
so, Steve, can I ask a question in there? Because I want a little bit of clarity on this too. So are you talking 25% of base pay, total pay? You guys were making 25%, they were making 25% less at their home country as well? Or are you talking 25% less in the combat bonuses? That was a question I had on the combat pay.
Okay. So after their NATO combat bonus, they were earning 75% less than we were. They were earning 25% of what we were after their bonus.
Damn, that's brutal. Okay.
Yeah, significant. And they knew it. And that was an issue for them. And when things started to heat up, that was a concern for them. That started ringing very loudly in their minds. And so there were a number of missions where they did some ad hoc things because they were, not really willing to take the same risk, because they knew essentially for them it wasn't worth it. But what we had to rely on was that interpersonal relationship to develop that commitment to the mission, because NATO had already sold them out for that 75% discount compared to what we were earning. And so we really had to every day, day in, day out, maintain those relationships, go to dinner together, plan together, We had to watch movies together. We asked how the families were doing because we got to know the families. We made sure that we kept up with them, and it was a real relationship that we maintained with these people, our fellow brothers in arms, in order to make missions happen. Because we needed a QRF, we needed someone to help us on our flank, we needed someone to iteratively train with our Afghan partners. And if we didn't make that happen, that was mission failure for us. So it was really challenging, and it was a constant effort, a constant battle, but ultimately it was a fruitful endeavor because what they were able to do was we were able to get them to have buy-in, and we were able to be successful with our mission at the end of the day.
So yeah, it's an interesting example because I think when we look at Afghanistan, and I can't even think of the amount of conversations we could have about Afghanistan. But when you look at our partners that supported us over there, and everything from, I know I did some work with Lithsof and a bunch of other NATO partners. On the special operations side, they definitely had more freedom, but I know on the conventional side, very few of them even left the base, right? I mean, you had the Brits doing a lot of work, the Polish did a lot of work, the Danes did a lot of work out there. They had their own AOs. But it was always really interesting to see because, they're coming in support of a NATO partner, i.e. us. And that conflict drug on for so long. I mean, I know there were times when I was over there where you're looking at each other and it's like, the hell are we doing here? So, and then I was over there in 2012 was my last trip to Afghanistan. And so, I mean, looking at it from that perspective, right before your trip that you're talking to, I mean, you got to have to deal with that internal to the team too at times, where it's like, we're all about getting after it. We're all about going and doing the mission. But at times there's still that legacy piece, and trying to put that into a partner foresight, looking at our NATO partners that are coming over at, 25 cents on the dollar too. So like, they don't even have the financial motivation. Like I know all of my deployments have always paid off the credit card debt I racked up prior to those deployments, you know? Like that's just putting in the piggy bank, because you're going to make it work the way you can. But that's a really interesting piece. Chris, I know, you've had some kind of unique experiences in deployments with hodgepodge teams and kind of leaning a little bit more towards, I think at once was called Perry's Irregulars. But if you can jump in a little bit on commitment too, man, and driving a team and building that commitment in a team, I think you've got some cool stories around that as well.
Right. And it's actually pretty interesting when you think about it and the stuff that we have to go through, because doing this stuff all around the world, I mean, specifically with the Philippines, Iraq, Afghanistan, not just coalition partner forces, as you guys are talking about, i.e. the other U.S. and other components that are coming over there to do the work, but the people that are on the ground that are essential for us to partner with. Those are the guys we really have to sell ourselves to. The missions that we are trying to do where we're at will not happen if we don't get host nation buy-in. And the problem that every time we go over there, it always would come up as it relates to commitment is, why should I trust you? I.e., they say it in different ways, but given the U.S.'s track record of following through on its commitments to its partner forces. And that's a huge deal. And of course, we're over there sweating in the same desert, bleeding the same blood, trying to accomplish these missions. So you really feel invested with these guys. And so that's usually what wins it out, is their commitment to you is based on performance. However, it comes back to, I think, what we all had to watch happen last August, this withdrawal from Afghanistan, and how many of us still have friends left over there, right? And I'm still actively, we are all working to get friends, fellows, comrades in arms out of that country right now. And so, that comes to, what is the next conflict going to look like? Because this is just going to be another example of how are we going to explain to our next partner what our intentions are, or how honorable we will be with the endeavors that we're going to undertake with them. So yeah, commitment is a constant, something that you're constantly maintaining. You have to make sure that your partner is willing to do willing to fight side by side and know that you are fully committed to this endeavor. And politics aside, I mean, that's what it comes down to on the field is you and I are in this together. We're going to make this happen. And, some of the stuff we might be able to sort out later on, but what we're doing right now is the most important thing. It's showing our genuine interest in what they're doing is the best way to get them to commit to what we are trying to accomplish.
Right. That interpersonal level is really where we're able to have the most success because, yeah, we do work against the grain in terms of what the politics might be one day to the next. But, in terms of being able to get people on our side and be able to achieve goals and intent, it's really that creating that personal relationship. And so, like I mentioned in the blog, one of the guiding principles for my team, for me, and continues to be, is really the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so when you make sure that psychological needs and the need to belong and you encourage the self-actualization of those opposite you're going to go a long way to get their buy-in because they see that you're being genuine, you're being authentic, and you're a real person to them, and they want to make sure that they help you and you get to the other side. So it's been something that I've been able to work with to gain buy-in and to ensure that we have good commitment whenever there's an operation. But yeah, there's definitely an uphill struggle when it comes to the politic angle whenever we have to do an operation.
Yeah, two things that go along with that is one is understanding the culture that you're working with. Because again, I've done this all around the world. We all have. Different things resonate differently with different cultures. Some places, earning their commitment was going out and getting really drunk with the leadership and telling some war stories and kind of seeing what we're like with our guard down. Some of it was measures of effectiveness, actually getting out there and accomplishing some stuff on the ground. And that's what they would appreciate, shedding some blood or mixing it up downrange. And it goes back to one of the things I always used to think about quite a bit was like the Jedburgh, the OSS teams in World War II, right? A couple of guys dropped in behind enemy lines, trying to work low visibility. And initially, until you start showing your value, you're much more valuable dead or turned over to the enemy. They can get a lot more for you by turning you over to the enemy. So you immediately, as soon as you hit the ground, these guys would have to start showing their value, right? And the people that they were working with understood the importance of the mission that they were trying to accomplish. And that's the only thing that kept them alive. Like 3 random guys on the ground are not going to do a lot against the Nazi army. However, over time and with their additional skill sets that they brought to bear, and once that was understood and with the commitment of the local forces, that's what ultimately made the difference for those guys.
Yeah, and then also speaking the same language, speaking to the Jedburghs, a lot of those teams jumped into Paris, or not into Paris, but France rather. And one of the key aspects of their skill set was the language and being able to communicate effectively. And then having that same lexicon, being able to speak on the same level so that there was no talking past each other. There was no miscommunication due to misunderstanding, et cetera. So that's a huge aspect of getting buy-in too, is having a similar dictionary to work with so that everybody's on that same page and you feel closer to those opposite you because there is a firm understanding.
So I want to jump in because I think there's an interesting piece to this, and I want to dial it back a little bit because we've talked really heavily on the military piece, but Steve, what you said, and Chris, what you followed up with, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think is a really key piece. So I want to jump to a different example I have, which is actually in responding to Hurricane Maria, which was a really interesting, kind of crazy experience for me. But following military, I worked for Waves for Water, and the first real kind of crazy disaster response I think I launched on was actually following Hurricane Irma. So I went down with a team, rad group of people. We linked up a few of us linked up in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and then jumped down to St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. So we had John Rose, Fritz Pierre-Louis, who's this rad Haitian dude that's just insane, and a story for another day. This guy's an animal. Ben Bourgeois, Dylan Graves, Chris Hudson came down, another SF guy. And so just a good group of people. But so we're down in St. Croix responding into the Virgin Islands following Hurricane Maria, jumping on, I'm pretty sure they were former drug runner boats, whatever, the cruising Navy, just speedboats running up and down, racing British carriers that are locking off the area, shenanigans. But I remember vividly sitting down with Ben and Dylan, and they were looking at what eventually would become Hurricane Maria off the coast of Africa, right? Like surfers, I never understood this, not being a surfer, but surfers can read weather like massively. Like it is a science to them because they want to understand where the swell is going to be from these storms. So like, yeah, man, it's going to hit. So we had maybe 3 or 4 days in St. Croix, and then it popped up and it was like, hey, Hurricane Maria is not just going to be a category 1. Like this is going to be a category 4. It's going to hit us in St. Croix, and it's going to direct from St. Croix to Puerto Rico. Now, part of the team, specifically Otto Flores, who is one of my best friends, and I love the man. He's like, dude, he's from Puerto Rico. He's a Puerto Rican. Like his family, his mom, his wife, his 2 sons are in Puerto Rico. Our entire support network that was driving us was in Puerto Rico. 2 guys that will become the core of Waves for Water Puerto Rico later on, Jorge Quintana and Jose Perez, also live in Puerto Rico. And so we sat down around the table and we ended up splitting the team, right? So John and Benny and Fritz and Jimmy Wilson, our videographers, stayed in St. Croix because they're madmen. Like they're absolute madmen. They're like, yeah, let's ride out a category 4 in St. Croix. The first thing it hits, or second thing it hits. And then I went on a small prop plane as the hurricane's hitting the island with Otto. We fly into San Juan to the private airfield, get picked up by Jorge, get dumped in an airfield or in a hotel. And while John and Benny and those guys are getting hammered by Maria on St. Croix, we had about 24 hours to prep. And this is where that Maslow's hierarchy of needs really shifted for me, right? So we had these guys leave their homes, go down to a different island not too far away to really work at helping other people around them, right? Like we're providing access to clean water to people that are absolutely devastated by, Irma was a massive, incredibly destructive storm, right? I think it was one of the highest pressure storms in history. And so it did insane damage across the US and British Virgin Islands. And so we were working so hard at this, but then the second Puerto Rico came on the map, it wasn't like the mission shifted. It was like they went down those rings of that hierarchy, right? They're like, I now have to go take care of my family. And there's no argument to this, right? Yep. I remember being in Iraq in 2008 with the Georgian military down outside of Diwania. And all of a sudden the Georgian military is on a plane, stealing everything they can and going back to Georgia because Russia had just invaded, right? Like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs and commitment to mission shifts with your employees. And so, and with your partners. So I get on a plane, we get back, we're in Puerto Rico. We spend we spent 24 hours just going around to every single friend of Jorge's and Otto's in San Juan, boarding up their places. We were hoisting 2x4s and sheets of plywood up the outside of up the outside of buildings to like 10th floor apartment buildings. Like it was a crazy scenario. And then we had some ceviche. And on my 36th birthday, we hunkered down and Hurricane Maria hit. And then I remember calling Otto at like 3 a.m. being like, why are my walls bleeding? He's like, it's just going to happen, man. That's just get used to it. And then I got really, really drunk with a bartender and Otto. And we started like watching the fans on the outside patio zip off and fly away. And we're naming them and taking bets on which fan is going to fly away next. And then after that, everything hit and it's back to, okay, let's find a place to stay. Let's make sure security. Let's get food. Oh shit. Otto's son is a diabetic and we're out of testing strips. Let's break into a Walgreens and get testing strips. All right, let's go trade some fuel that we siphoned off of a friend's barge to use a generator for security and food. Like it was 3 days of like, okay, let's get our families and the people that are important taken care of after this thing. And then once we got to that point, once I could see the light switch on the guys and they realized, okay, what's important to me is taken care of. Now let's step to that next rung. Now I'm ready to engage that mission. Now I'm ready to move forward. And had I, which I've seen many leaders do, which is like, hey, my mission is everyone else. My mission is my mission isn't just the team. Like I have to go do my job. There's an entire island that is in catastrophic scenario and it's my job to help all of them. Well, yeah, but if I didn't respond to you and support my team members first, there's no way we would have gotten to the scenario we did. I mean, we were the first ones on the West Coast, like Chris Hudson and Dylan Graves, where they beat the National Guard out to the West Coast. We were providing water to the Puerto Rican National Guard because their leadership had left them. They didn't have food or water. And so we're taking care of them on the west side of the island, which was cut off. But it's because we all focused on taking care of what was important. We spent that time nailing down our team's needs. And then once that was satisfied, we were able to grow past that. And again, this is obviously a very extreme scenario, but I think it paints the importance of, we can talk about money, we can talk about everything else, but when you're talking about motivating a team, if you can't meet your employees' hierarchies, if you can't meet your team's hierarchy of needs first, the idea of being able to get them to sell and move on that mission is not going to happen. And I think the highlight of this too is that works for military and it works for civilian across the board. Like, make sure your team is taken care of. Steve, you said something to me the other day I thought was really good. And it was like, you got to look at your employees as a weapon system, right?
Yeah.
And so if your team, if your employees and for lack of a better term, if your weapon systems are not functioning well, they're not going to lend to the fight the way you want them to. And so it's that same thing, like meet their needs, take care of your crew, and then you get to really employ them and get those gains you see when you're approaching your mission and what you're trying to achieve. So that was my bit of a tirade, but I enjoy that story because Maria was such an important thing for me. It probably saved my life in many ways, that experience over those year and a half. But I think that entire thing is a story for another day.
But a big part of that, big takeaway, and as it relates to the commitment piece, it's the humanitarian aspect. That's what underlies everything, and that's what really links everybody together. We talk about doing different things around the world, whether it's combat or not, or some of the post-disaster places you and I have been to. Even when we don't speak the language, it's the humanitarian or just the human aspect of it is what resonates with people. When people see that there are others that are willing to commit to them on that level, that have their best interests in mind, I think people understand that, and it makes people want to give back, because the whole point of the Maslow's hierarchy, as you go further down, the most basic but most important things need to get taken care of first, and it's a humanitarian piece. I mean, that's what it is. That's how we all relate to one another, regardless of what it is necessarily that we're trying to accomplish. It's how we relate to one another as human beings is what's going to promote the most resonance with each other.
Yeah, I love that. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, no problem. It's those safety needs, right? So you take care of the safety, and then you can move on to other things. And in terms of humanity and humanitarian aspect, it's funny because I think in terms of the military, you finally see that the humanity aspect of leadership. And it's unfortunate when it happens, it's in those terminal officers. So what I always try to say to, when I mentor younger officers is, hey, you should emulate the demeanor and how terminal officers go about their business without the recklessness. So don't be reckless, but speak truth to power. When you see something that's askew, make sure you address it. Make sure that you're not thinking of career first and later. You think mission first and then career later. Because what you see with a terminal officer, and when I say a terminal officer, that's a person who knows they're getting out of the Army, they're transitioning out, and so they essentially have nothing to lose. And so with that, that being the case, they then feel free to be able to address things that they previously would not have done otherwise. And so they're not afraid to make sure that things are the way that they need to be, that they address issues that they see as problems and seek out true solutions without fear of repercussions affecting their career. So being that emulating the actions of a terminal officer without the recklessness, I think, is key in terms of showing humanity and being able to gain buy-in from people because they see that you truly care at that point about mission, about people, and not first about self and career.
Yeah, I mean, what was the saying I remember as an officer? Like the way you approach things is my men, my mission, myself, right? Like you're always
The
last in
mission,
the
the men,
hierarchy.
and me.
Mission, the men, and me, right? And so when you look at it from, and I think there's a good example, and when we kind of step away from the safety piece, right? Because I think safety is huge in our line of work when you look at military and disaster relief, but from a, I mean, maybe it's still important from a corporate setting, but I think I was just looking at, I think it was Dan Price. It was a CEO of Gravity Payments. And there was, and you can go back and look at it, but he was a CEO that did minimum $70,000 a year to all of his, I think, 120 employees, right? And I think everyone was like, this is going to fail. Like, this is going to crash. Like, you cannot pay everybody that amount. But I think there was two pieces to this, and it goes back to the humanity piece, right? He's not the CEO that's going like, hey, do you have those TPS reports? Are those going to be in this Saturday? I'm going to need you to stay an extra day. And, I'm going to take your stapler and you're going to burn down the fucking office building, right? There's that aspect. And we've all worked with those people where it's like the company, the mission means everything. I don't care if I burn you to the fucking ground, right? Like, we've all had those bosses. I had one of those bosses and I loved him because I learned a ton from him, a great guy. But he even said, he's like, when I'm hitting country, I'm running the wheels off this bus. And 3.5 months in, he changed command and he'd run the fucking wheels off the bus. And we were struggling to adjust to a new commander. And he was like, holy shit, I've got a bus with no wheels. And, he didn't have the personality of the first commander. So it was tough to keep the thing on the tracks, or on the road. But when you look at it from this perspective, and Dan Price with Gravity Payments, you're looking at where profits skyrocketed, right? Like everything blew every analyst out of the water because they're like, you can't pay this much money. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. But what he did is he drove such a positive commitment to the mission of his company that his productivity and profits skyrocketed. And I mean, out of control skyrocketed. I think it's going to be a long-term case study. But when you think about it that way, when you take a look at everything we've talked about with the hierarchy of needs, like if you can take a look at, and then I think this was Seattle, I'm pretty sure Seattle, but when you look at it and you really look at it, and he's talking to people, see, if you're making $50K a year in Seattle, you're struggling to make by because that place is insanely expensive to live. But, if he can look at it, be like, if I pay everyone $20,000 more, my profits are going to go up 25% because now they're not worried about that. Now they can really focus on their job. They're not worried about anything else on those 3 rungs beneath, their purpose right now. They're those 3 or 4 rungs beneath their job. They can focus on now that next level in the hierarchy, and they can get really, really good at that. And I think the commitment that he generated and the loyalty that he showed to his company as a young CEO paid dividends that I don't think many people saw coming. And that's fantastic. I think it's used as a red herring often in a lot of arguments for like different minimum wage and different economic strategies. But I think if you look at it and break it down, it is a very specific study in generating commitment to a mission and a purpose inside of an organization.
Absolutely.
Well, goes to. Okay, Chris.
I think a lot of things fell into place there, not taking anything against. I mean, it's amazing. And it's what we would all like to see happen in every aspect. Right. But, there's a lot that goes into it. I don't, the product, the market, the ability to do that, the ability to have the funds to be able to do that. I mean, ideally that would be great if every organization could do that. Because again, if you can take that piece away from people having to worry about, and give them a little bit more so that they are comfortable and can focus on the next level of their hierarchy, as it were. I mean, amazing. And so I hope it is studied. I'm familiar with what you're talking about, and I'd definitely like to look more into it because it is used also, like you're saying, a lot of people will cite that as something that can be accomplished because it has been. But again, there's a lot of variables that go into it with different markets, different products, and to see if it can be exported to another venue would be pretty good.
Yeah. Well, what that demonstrates too is that commitment is a two-way street. Not only do people who are members of the team or on the lower rungs of an organization need to show commitment, but so too does the leadership. The leadership needs to show commitment to the people and show that they care and show that they are engaged because that's what generates the reciprocity of the commitment. And that also too that leads to an idea that like what I've experienced and what I like to implement is that I give out 100% of my trust to everybody in my organization from day one when I step into a position, because otherwise, if you're forcing people to earn your trust, for them to build their commitment to you, then you're just wasting time and you're taking on more burden than you would normally be able to, or what you should, instead of delegating it to others because you trust them to do their job. And so, yeah, you give people 100% and then you let them chip away at it over time or not, in order to get max effort out of them, because otherwise you're just going to overburden yourself.
Yeah, and I think, and we've talked, and we always come back to this thought process, like, I want to get max effort out of them, but I don't want max effort. I think this is a piece where, and maybe it's just semantics, and you know me, I'll argue semantics all day long because for some reason I enjoy it more than anything, but I don't want max effort. I want max commitment, because effort is, in my mind, is kind of fleeting. Like, you'll give it while you have it, right? All right, I've got an energy today. I'm going to give it everything I've got. But if you're committed to a mission, if you're committed to a cause, you're going to push way past that max effort threshold, right? Like, you are going to drive yourself because you want to see success. So you're not just going to work hard. You're not just going to give effort. You're going to be creative. You're going to be intuitive. You're going to feel comfortable questioning what's going on. And you're going to be a real team player that is going to give everything to that and not accept failure. And I think that's commitment to it versus, I'll give a lot of effort for some good money, but if I'm committed to the mission of something, if I'm committed to the leader and either on an individual level or on a, I think it really drives a different approach than just max effort. And I know I'm picking apart because I think you mean the exact same thing I just said, Steve. But
you're absolutely right. I mean, effort is the physical component. Commitment is the mental component, right?
Yeah. And then, yeah, I totally agree. And in terms of what you're saying there, yeah, what they'll wind up doing is giving not just the standard, but they'll give what's required of whatever their task is, whatever the mission is. And so that's what you really want, what's required and not just what's been put out.
Yeah, I want that. I want that belief, and I want that shared focus and that shared commitment where it's like, we are not going to accept anything but success in this thing. If you can generate that in a team, you've succeeded as a leader, right? Like, we are all going to make this work because not one of us is going to give up and be like, I've checked my block today. I've got my hours. I made my bonus. We're good. It's like, we are going to all focus because we believe in the commitment and we believe in the mission of this team. And that is something I think very few leaders are able to do because it's hard. But when you can do it, either through meeting Maslow's hierarchy and also providing that inspirational mission and being that leader that leads from the front and is there to sacrifice and support your guys or your people, I think that's a really important thing. Man, this has been a really good conversation. I knew it was going to, because commitment is such a unique topic and honestly so important in the realm of leadership.
Real quick, if I could, Rob, because it is difficult. Another part of it is, it's difficult as a leader to gauge effort and commitment and differentiate between the two quite frequently, because effort can be sustained based on a bunch of different variables, but it doesn't necessarily mean commitment. Effort can be, I'm trying to line myself up for my next job. I'm trying to line myself up for a promotion. So I'm going to put some effort into this to impress my boss or to do what I should or to be the number one guy, with a specific focus in mind. And then what happens is when you meet that focus, or that focus passes or changes, or one of those variables change, your effort may drop off, your motivation may drop off. When you're truly committed to something, that stays the test of those variables. The focus, you believe in that mission, regardless of if you're getting something personally out of it or not. But the effort can be based on some other variable or intangible that can change. And then as a leader, if you're pushing your people hard because you think they're committed, but really they're putting effort in for a different reason, and that changes on you, things can go sideways really quick.
Yeah, definitely. And like what you're talking about there is like, yeah, people could surge effort at times in order to show off and to show a facade that maybe isn't necessarily the true version of self. Whereas, the other times maybe they're doing subpar, but by surging there, what they're able to do is be compliant and check boxes. So yeah, it's definitely, there's a difference between being compliant and being committed. Being compliant means you check the boxes. Being committed means that you're dedicated to success.
Right. And certain variables can change that really quickly, right? For example, and again, going back to our military world, a lot of guys in garrison are more than happy to stay late, stay after the boss, work harder, be the number one guy, show up on time. But bullets start flying, or you may actually get killed. Some guys' motivations will change too. They start saying, well, okay, this is going to change my wife, my family, a bunch of different variables in my life now. Maybe I'm not going to be the first guy off the truck, the first guy in the door. I've seen that happen before too. Just those variables change and people's motivations and people's effort changes along with it.
Yeah, I think I've seen that from both sides too, Chris. I totally agree. Like, I've seen guys freeze in the door, and I've also seen guys who literally went AWOL for almost the entire time back in garrison, heard we were deploying again, and showed back up. I was like, I don't care what you do to me. I just want to deploy again. And downrange, they are just a phenomenal soldier. Then you get back and they never come back from block leave because they're committed to the mission before, but they're not committed to everything that happens to prep for those missions. They're just not in that mindset. And there's probably a few things wrong with those people, but again, judging commitment and seeing where people lie, like it's a talent. And I think as a leader, you have to learn how to do that.
Yeah. Hey, as a leader, you figure out there's a place for everybody. You just got to figure out where it is, right?
Yeah, that's
exactly.
The funny thing about large organizations is that you get into the law of large numbers because, like, 1 out of every 1,000 people is an axe murderer, right? So you got all kinds that you need to deal with.
I feel like that's where we leave off commitment, because 1 in every 1,000 is an axe murderer. Yeah, guys, great conversation. I enjoyed this a ton. I'm going to turn it over. Chris, Steve, last comments from you guys to kind of round this guy out. We're hitting a good point here, and this was a really good conversation. So, and then we'll leave you back to shovel your walkway in Texas, Chris. You've gone from 70 to 20 with a little bit of snow.
Kidding. Texas has changed drastically over the last 24 hours. Yeah, I mean, this was an open-ended conversation, and I hope to all of the listeners out there, you guys understand, like, there's a lot of different ways we could take this. And also, if anyone would like to hear us talk about it in a specific way, please let us know. Because we're just kind of shooting from the hip and going along a non-formal syllabus here. So we like talking. Rob is probably the best of the three of us at doing the talking, but we're all trying to get in on some of this. And we could have taken this a lot. I mean, the commitment and effort, all of that. It's we could talk all day about it, literally. So this is a good one. I hope we revisit it at some point, because there's already things I'm thinking about that I wish I would have said.
Yeah, so be good to others, be goal-oriented, and don't forget about self, and all else will follow. That's all I've got.
Yeah, guys, Chris, I agree with you, man. Like, and Steve, like, this is easily a conversation that we could continue for hours, and I want to pick this one up again. I think as we look at next month, I think it'll fall in really nicely as well. So I think this is going to come back well. But hey, thank you so much to everybody who's listening. Please like and subscribe. We're available on all major podcast platforms. And check us out on cinemapare.com and all of our socials. So thank you very much. Like, follow, subscribe, and have a good day.